Team composition in Limbus can generally be classified into 4-ish categories, or from my perspective they do anyways. There's throwing a bunch of good ideas next to each other and calling it a day, centering a team around Sin Resonance usually to fulfill a powerful conditional, using IDs of the same faction to activate effects that only apply when they're on the field together, and most prominently, focusing around a status or keyword, utilizing IDs that focus around that keyword and who derive the most advantage from it being present. Now whenever you hear about status teams, almost exclusively they'll be referred to by the status they're dedicated to. Rupture, Burn, Charge, it makes sense. However, there's something to say that these status teams have to be isolated to just one keyword. The most and pretty much only example of this are the IDs under the colloquially named Blois, an archetype released in Season 3 that takes advantage of both bleed and poison their effects. Now, what separates the Blois units from someone like Lobotomy Remnant Faust? She both gains poise and inflicts rupture. Is she a repoise unit, perchance? Well, that's an interesting question that doesn't really have an answer in my eyes, but here's my take based on superfluous semantics. What defines an ID as being part of a hybrid archetype rather than just happening to trade in more than one is if they interact with each other in some meaningful way. For instance, Bukwad first makes his Sane passive, makes sure his skills inflict more bleed on critical hit, something that can only be achieved through poise. The statuses mutually complement each other. Of course, Blois isn't the only instance of hybrid IDs, it's just by far the most fleshed out and prevalent. There's Ncorp Dawn, who utilizes both nails and tremors with a passive that makes her inflict absurd amounts of tremor counts to target with nails, and the Man of the Hour, Rosespanner Gregor. For context, the Rosespanners are a group of Season 2 identities based on a Fixer faction in Canto 4 that primarily deals with tremor. However, the IDs that spawn off of them, Representative Rodian, Mersault, and the aforementioned Gregor, use Charge and Tremor. Specifically Charge and not Self-Tremor, since this is before Project Moon completely lost their minds. A very understandable question right now is, hey wait, are Representative Rodians and Mersault not hybrid IDs? They spend Charge to boost the effectiveness of Tremor, that seems pretty synergistic to me. And to that I say yeah. Although Mersault is especially fickle since he gains Charge with his skill 3 and sequentially spends it in his skill 3 with no other means of acquiring it. However, in my eyes, Charge is kind of cheating. Being largely self-contained and not having conditionals baked into the way it functions, entirely a vibes-based thing, but I digress. Rosespanner Gregor, on the other hand, is indeed a Charge and Tremor ID, but is also Rupture. For the sake of getting everyone on the same page, let's quickly, or as quickly as I can, do a full kit overview. Rev Up. This is a wholly unremarkable, but not necessarily bad skill 1. 11 is a perfectly average roll, and being Gluttony enables it to fuel Ledger Domain, though you'll have to get the Sloth elsewhere. This is his best clashing tool. A 16 is nothing to scoff at, though when it comes to single coin skill 2s, the base power is on the lower bracket. That said, it has the honor of going Tremor, Rupture, and Charge positive. Overall, a very solid skill. Let's Grind Him also rolls a 16 with its Tremor count conditional fulfilled, yet is slightly less consistent than skill 2 since it has 3 coins. This is the most damaging skill in his kit, on the positive. Also, this is his only means of spending Charge, with the condition being a bit deceptive. You see this little semicolon here? Yeah, this is not to separate the effects. The spending Charge effect only applies when you burst Tremor, meaning the count application has 2 conditionals to activate, which is definitely unideal. However, that count, assuming you have the maximum amount of Charge, does make you go positive on a 3-coin skill, which is genuinely pretty nice. The passive is good. It comes into play with more or less everything in his kit. There's not much to say about it, you always want it. It's not going to hinder you, and you don't really have to pay attention to it either, though its requirement of 4 Gluttony might overlap with Ledger Domain if you're using that a lot. You don't really have to think about this passive. It's perfectly fine. Sawblade Maintenance is not it. It has like the same effects as its regular passive, with the added caveat of requiring lower speed, but who exactly you would want to put this on is beyond me. We'll get more into detail about this passive later, so let's just keep it rolling. With that covered, notice anything weird about the conditionals present in his kit? Yeah, all of them require Tremor, which places him in a bizarre position. Yes, technically Gregor is self-sufficient for a time. Grease Change is Tremor count positive, but you are not going to reach 5 count on his own. So naturally, he should go on a Tremor team to make the most of his conditionals, right? Not exactly. You see, even with his conditionals fulfilled, the payoff for the most part is still Rupture, something which does not traditionally go with Tremor at all, and outside of that Rupture, he doesn't do all that much with Tremor, granting 2 count with his skill 2 and bursting once with his skill 3, with the added caveat of reducing count by 2 when you do so. Is running him really worth it then when the payoff is some pocket change worth of extra fixed damage? Not really. Where he actually has a niche is in Rupture. Now, that may seem curious. After all, he's reliant on having Tremor on a foe to make the most of his effects, so he's baking on Grease Chains to give an enemy 1 Tremor count on the following turns for his skill 3 to not be -3 Rupture count. Needless to say, that isn't always going to happen. While all of this is true, IDs aren't wholly restrained by their kit. They still have E.G.Os to use after all, and Rosespanner Greg happens to take advantage of one in particular quite well. Yes, Rosespanner Gregor's best use is as a user of AEDD. It provides both a very generous 10 charge count to Gregor on use, while also inflicting 15 spark discharge, which happens to give 1 charge count to anyone who hits this unit, while also giving the occasional Rupture count when slapped with a Gloom attack. The charge is nice, but what we're really here for is that sweet Rupture count. Any Gloom attack becomes count neutral, which, when Rupture count is as sparsely given as it is, and considering how Gloom isn't that rare among Rupture units, makes AEDD a very useful tool to have. Rosespanner 2 is an especially good user of the E.G.O since A, he's a Rupture unit, B, he perfectly fuels it, and C, he's a charge unit, making sure his skill 3 will get as much count as possible applied, if you can burst Tremor with it. Though having to use Gloom attacks is a slight problem, though this isn't all that bad. There are plenty of good Rupture IDs to use that have Gloom skills, and surely there isn't a massive 4 Gluttony Resonance shaped hole that needs to be filled. Surely. While Rosespanner Gregor does have a niche and is by no means entirely unviable in Rupture, this is admittedly kind of sad. His hyper nature does absolutely nothing for him. Sure, having charge does theoretically mean AED helps him, but charge is just a limitation on his kit, and don't even mention Tremor. When a new Rupture Gregor ID comes, he's going to be replaced, left with nothing to do on any team. Being a hybrid only hinders him, which leads me to an unfortunate reality of balance. Having multiple statuses in your kit means you have to be worse at applying those statuses. Of course it does, since if he was top of the line in multiple statuses, he'd overlap with multiple other IDs, limiting team building and future design and invalidating pre-existing units, which is why PM won't ever let a hybrid ID be good. Wait.